Good evening, everybody. We'll have a few quick announcements and then a prayer, and then we'll make our way back into the Gospel of Luke. So I hope y'all, if you have a Bible, can be making your way over there to the end of chapter 22. We'll finish up chapter 22 tonight. We're making great time, making great ground in the Gospel of Luke. As far as our sick and prayer list go, not many new names. I know one that has been added. Miss Shirley Sewell. David, how is she doing? Okay, had a bad headache the last 2 or 3 days. So we Gotcha. Okay, appointment the 28th to have that checked out. Well, then we'll keep that in our prayers. I'll write that down. And we'll hope and pray for a good update from that and a good response there. Let's see. Most of these names we've already mentioned. I know Tammy Wisdom is in tonight with a stomach bug, so we'll keep her in our prayers, and I'm sure all the kids as well. You know, if Paul's in charge of cooking and taking care of everybody, we'll pray for them too. If she's down, I know that's the way it is with a lot of us, a lot of our families. Also, the sympathy goes out to the family of Jimmy Knight. That's Miss Martha Tucker's brother. He passed away on Monday, and then they had visitation yesterday and the funeral service today in Red Bull and Springs. And so we'll definitely keep them in our prayers. A thank you was sent to us from Tony Gregory. Many of you know him as Cheesy, I think. But he wanted a thank you to be announced for all of the cards and thoughts and comments that had been sent from our church family, specifically to him. So if any of y'all were a part of that, it meant a lot to him, and he wanted you to know. So thank you for that. Then Andrew Frazier, the Fraziers who've moved here from Wisconsin and have started attending with us. Their son is still in the hospital, and they're praying for his recovery. They left Sunday morning after services to go to North Carolina. So as far as what we've most recently heard, he's still in the hospital. He had a surgery on his colon that was a byproduct of a past surgery or aftermath of a past surgery he had on his appendix. So it sounds like a chain of events that brought this on, but they're really hoping that they got all of that, I think, excess tissue all removed in the colon area. But so he's recovering and everything, and they're over that way. So other than that, I think those are all the new ones I have. There's still quite a few on here. Bruce Thomas, is he back home? Did I hear that correctly? So that's great to hear. Bruce Thomas is back home. Any others? Yes. Surgery Thursday. Gotcha. Miss Judy Jenkins is having her surgery tomorrow. The moment you said it, I remembered. So we'll keep her. That has been a long time coming, a month or so time coming. It's been. I'm hoping that it all goes as smoothly as she's been praying that it will. Any others? All right. I think that's most. Yeah. Okay. Donnie Coulter. Going through some health issues and would appreciate our prayers. We'll definitely do it. Any others? Okay. Okay. Minister in Murfreesboro. And you said major surgery for what now? All right. Well, then we can definitely keep David Young in our prayers as well. Okay. Well, if there isn't anything else, then we can open up in a prayer, and then make our way over into the Gospel of Luke. So, if you would, let's go to God together. Lord, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you that there are things that weigh on us throughout the day and throughout the week, and it is such a blessing to be able to come here and realize for the millionth time that those things aren't going to matter in eternity, and the weight that lifts is so it's so liberating. It's a gift from you, and we thank you for that. We ask that as we go throughout our lives and our days, that we can be shining examples for you. And we ask that as we do our best to understand you and understand your word better, I pray that we as a congregation can find you. Lord, I pray that we never reduce ourselves or lower our teaching of your word into sermons and classes on merely just do's and don'ts because the preacher said, or do's and don'ts because of this or that or the other. But I pray, Lord, ultimately that we see you, that we witness you, that we come to know you, that we fall in love with your word, and we let our beholding of you be what changes us and forms us. And Lord, may our convictions be that much stronger when they're rooted in seeing you and not rooted in what any preacher, elder, teacher, whoever has ever said. And I would like you to be with our study this evening, and may everything that we take from here, every life-changing point, every take-home application, may it be rooted in your word and in Scripture, and may it mold us to be the people that you see within us, that you're chiseling away at, and we're thankful for that process. We have many that are on our sick and prayer list, Lord, and there are some that have come out of surgery, some that are going to be going into them, others who have lost loved ones, and some that are unsure exactly what's happening and what's going on, but they know that something's wrong, and they're in need of some relief from either the pain or discomfort or whatever it might be. Lord, please be with each of those and help us to always be understanding. May we ask that we don't have to always go through the exact same suffering as somebody else to be able to empathize and relate with them. May we be able to do our best, even if we haven't been in the exact same spot, to show care and concern and compassion. Be with us as we go throughout the rest of our week. And we ask that you please watch over us and our loved ones and our family. And may we all be one step closer to spending an eternity with you. And we pray all this through Jesus. Amen. All right. In this portion of Luke, we're going to take I've said this probably a million times. You're probably used to it. We're going to take a slightly different approach with this passage from the normal, mainly because that's what we do here, I guess. But what we're going to do is I'm going to ask for 4 different volunteers, and we're going to split up and read, I guess, the end of Luke chapter 22, and we're going to discuss what happens, but we're going to probably spend more time seeing how all these things connect together and how all these things apply to us, because I'm a firm believer that when we go back and we remember the very beginning of the Gospel of Luke and the way that Luke wrote and the reason why Luke wrote, it's not a coincidence. And again, 1,000th time, I feel like, we're used to hearing me say this. It's not a coincidence that the passages that we're about to read are clustered together the way they are, in the order that they are, that he chooses to tell them in the way that he does. And they're going to lead us to a pretty obvious conclusion once we read all of them and once we see all of them, and it clicks. You're going to realize that's exactly what Luke is kind of highlighting and illustrating here. So I'm excited for that. But if we could, if you already have your passages split up into these headings, it'll be really easy to split them up with me. But if we could get someone to read Luke 22, verses 24 through 30, and then somebody else to cover 31 through 34. 31 through 34. A third person to get 35 through 38. And then a final person to get 39 through 46. And as always, whoever has verse 24 through 30, please feel free to go ahead and start reading, and I'll thank you in advance.
A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. For who is the greater, one who reclines at the table, or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves. You are those who have stayed with me in my trials, and I assign to you, as my Father assigned to me, a kingdom, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
Thank you. Then whoever wants to pick up in verse 31 through 34.
And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. But he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. Then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny me 3 times, and you know me.
Thank you. And then someone want to pick up right there and go 35 through 38.
And Jesus asked them, when I sent you without purse, bag, and sandals, would you like anything? Nothing, they answered. He said to them, but now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your clothes and buy one. It is written, he was numbered with the transgressors. And I tell you that this must be fulfilled in me. Yes, what is written about me is reaching its fulfillment. Disciples said, see, Lord, here are 2 swords. That's enough, he replied.
Thank you. And whoever wants to finish out with 39 through 46.
Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives. His disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, pray that you will not fall into temptation. He withdrew about a stone's throw behind them, knelt down and prayed. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. Being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly. His sweat was like drops of blood falling on the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep and exhausted with sorrow. Why are you sleeping? He asked them. Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's kind of walk through everything that we just read. But before we get there, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever, can you think of a time, and this will be where I need some feedback, and I'm so sorry. I know in the auditorium class we love finding a way to give 1 or 2 word answers. This might require an entire sentence or more. Can anyone think of a time where you have told someone something? Maybe it might fit well, like if it's a child or a grandchild, and you thought you covered it really well, or you thought you explained it to them really well, and then the very next thing that they do just makes you think, did you hear anything that I just said? Like, did you hear a word that just came out of my mouth? I just told you the exact opposite. Has anybody been in that boat before? And if you would like to share how that feels, that would be wonderful. Or details, if you would like. Unless it's about your spouse, and that'll get you in trouble. Don't do that. But yeah.
Years ago, the kids used to run the stop at the road strip, and they parked in the parking lot, and you couldn't get any customers in the parking lot.
Okay.
I would say something to them, you got to let the parking lots be open until closing time, please, and just stay off the parking lots, because they really couldn't get any customers between my shop on down the street, and they would leave. And the very next day, the same one always come back, and I told them one day out there, I said, kids, I just don't understand this. It's like, back when I was young, if the elderly lady caught me in her apple orchard and told me to get out of it, I thought it meant for a lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, it was back every afternoon, walking to the parking lot. So, finally, eventually, we had to change
And so if there are any of you that were that young person sitting in Kirby's Barbershop parking lot, please come forward now as we stand and as we sing. Yeah, there's a few in here that I saw. You started telling that story and they were like, he's talking about me. Yeah. But yeah, that's a perfect example of told and walked through it. And then the very next day, it's like, did it just in one ear, out the other? Anybody else? Yeah, Trey.
Took the youth group when I was in Martin to arcade and go-karts and all that stuff. And they had a big time, ventured off. Got everybody together. We had 2 bands. Did head count, did roll call. Okay, everybody go straight from here to the van. Did head count on there. Pulled out. Got to Dyersburg. One of the other band folks says, "Is so-and-so with you?" "No, he's in with you." "No, he's with you." "No." We called back and he's sitting there, said that the police called you. They called the state police because we left the child. And in my defense, that's the only youth person I ever lost in any of the trips.
Yeah.
But he was there when we did the head count and everything. When I went back and got him, I said, "Why did you not get on the list?" He just, "Well, I still had all these tokens and I needed to get rid of them."
Oh,
And so,
I hope it was worth it.
well, his mother dealt with that. We didn't know, but
Gotcha.
I was just like, "You're kidding."
Oh, he slid right past. I don't guess we left a cell phone at a gas station in the bad part of Madison. But other than that, haven't left a kid. So that's, man, I can't relate. But that's a good one. And I guess we could probably, some of you have thought of more instances where we walked through it and we laid it out. And I thought we made it so clear, and I thought we made it so simple, and I thought we made it so understandable, but boy, is that not the case. I want us to look just a few verses ahead and see a few verses behind, what comes before what we just read, and see what has Jesus just done. Instituted the Lord's Supper. He has just walked through the way that he's just laid out for his 12, the way that his sacrifice was going to stick with them, the way it was going to eternally mean something physically here on this earth, and even as far as I want to dine with you in this way again until we do it in the very throne room of heaven. It has physical ramifications for us, the church still today, and it also has eternal, I guess, things that go along with it that are spiritual that are going to take place in heaven one day at His second coming. And it's a pretty big deal when He's talking about, here is my body, here is what it's going to represent, here is it's for your remembrance. And then here is my blood. It's going to be poured out. And it's going to be poured out as a new part. It's the new covenant. It's God's covenant. It is a gift. It's everything that God has worked towards. Like, that's such a big moment. Jesus, like the entire purpose was, I understand, for His sacrifice, but the entire purpose was to bring God's covenant. And in this moment, He delivers it and He gives it to them, and He does it so beautifully and so eloquently. And you would just think after 3 years of spending day in and day at His feet and listening to His, you would think that they would get it. And then the very next thing that happens is what? An argument arises among them. Huh? Yeah, I'm gonna be higher than you. I'm gonna be higher than so. I'm gonna be greater than so and so. Here are my credentials. Well, Jesus called me first. Well, Jesus changed me. Well, Jesus allowed me to do this and this. Well, y'all all know that I'm the closest with Jesus. Were any of y'all on the Mount of Transfiguration? We weren't supposed to talk about it, but I guess I will now. I was, and that makes me more important than the rest. Well, I've done it, and it turns into this. It goes, how stark of a transition when we go from Jesus instituting the Lord's Supper into, right after it, an argument of who the greatest is going to be. And maybe, they've entered into Jerusalem. I understand that there is an expectation of an earthly kingdom to come and a very physical kingdom to come. Maybe it's still not clicking with them, and maybe they thought, we've entered into Jerusalem. Jesus has made it clear that we're here for a purpose. There's all of these Jews that are going to be coming for the Passover Feast of Unleavened Bread. And since all that's going to be happening, this is the perfect time. This is going to be the perfect time for Jesus to announce who He is and take the throne. And maybe we should all duke it out for who's going to be His number 2, and number 3, and 4, and so on and so forth. Maybe that was kind of their expectation, them being in Jerusalem. I'm not 100% for certain what brought on this conversation of who the greatest is, but I know that it stands in complete and total contradiction to everything that Jesus was just communicating to them through His new covenant, the Lord's Supper. Yeah, Adam?
Right before that, he started questioning who was going to betray him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, Jesus said, whoever's hand is here with me is going to betray him. Can't you just see these 12? I'm not going to, like you said, I saw it at the Mount of Transfiguration.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way I would betray him. And then it gets into the argument from who's betraying Jesus to, well, there's no way I'm going to betray him because I'm more of the greatest, right?
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Whoever has the greatest resume is the least likely to betray Him. Yeah.
They're going trying to point a finger to who's going to betray him.
Right.
To the flip side of, okay, if I'm not going to betray him, then I've got to be the top of it.
And so everybody is, they're patting themselves. They're selling themselves. It's self-promotion. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but get on social media. That's all it is. Self-promotion of if I can build myself up greater than everybody else, then obviously I'm not going to betray Jesus, just like what Adam was saying, because of X, Y, Z. And it's interesting the way that Jesus responds. And it's so wonderful the way, because I don't know about y'all, but just imagine for a moment the feeling of, I spent 3 years teaching them everything that I could. I spent 3 years walking with them, 3 years performing miracles for them, 3 years just talking with them over food, talking with them through life, explaining the depths of God. And here I am, about to go and die, and the 12 people closest to me, all they can do is argue about who's the greatest. I can't imagine. If I was Jesus, I would have turned around and I would have walked off, and everybody would have been left without a hope because I'd have been that upset. But luckily, that's not what He does. He tells them exactly how they can get what they want, and it's not what they think. And here's what that means: is He tells them it's the Gentiles who seek after lordship. It's the Gentiles who seek after, exercising authority or control one over another. And for a group of Jews, that would have been quite the no-no or quite the insult, because, if the Gentiles do it, and that's definitely not something we want to do. So Jesus makes that little connection up front. This is not something that God's people are to be doing. This is something that foreigners or pagans do, trying to argue about who's the greatest. But He goes on even further, and I love the way that He connects it almost, to Himself. Verse 26, but not so with you, rather let the greatest among you be as the youngest, the leader is the one who serves. For who is the greater, one who reclines at table or the one who serves? It is not the one who reclines at table, but I am among you as the one who serves. And Jesus is making that connection that the world's standard for authority or the world's standard for greatness or the world's standard for a good leader is going to be in direct contrast to Jesus's. They're not going to be the same. They're not going to overlap. They're not going to look just alike. But here is the part that I love, is that he tells them, and he makes it so clear in verses 28 through 30. If they're arguing about greatness, they're arguing about who is the greatest, he tells them, if greatness is what you want, God can fulfill that. It's just not going to happen the way you think you're going to get it right now. He said, if you will, instead of chasing after the world's greatness the way the Gentiles do, instead of trying to one-up one another and exercise authority over one another and be the dominant leader or whoever it is, if you will instead in this life right now choose servanthood and choose humility and walk in that path, verses 28 through 30. You are those who have stayed with me in my trials, and I assign to you as my Father assigned to me a kingdom, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. He makes it clear as they're arguing about greatness. He said that the greatness you're seeking, or the prestige or the reward, maybe, that might be the best word for it. The reward that you're seeking can be found, but it's not going to be found the way that people in this world are trying to find it. It's going to be found by living the way that Jesus did. It's going to be found as in servitude. And so I love the way that he corrects them, but at the same time he also shows them that God is the answer to what you're searching for right now. As worldly of a thought as that is, searching for glory and greatness, God has an answer to that, but you've got to be able to be on board with His solution and His answer being of a spiritual nature and not a physical one. And if you can be on board with that, then 12, you can quit this argument right now and find everything you ever wanted in the God who sent me, being Jesus. And so I guess we take that and apply that really quick. Spiritual leaders are not going to be the same as worldly leaders. They're just simply not. Because if we read this passage, they take an approach that is seeking to serve first. And if they end up emerging as a leader, they emerge as a leader in their service. I think too many times we assume that the best leaders are the ones who perfectly exemplify 7 habits of a highly effective person. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book before or not. Or we think that the best leaders for the church are the ones who can lead in a worldly capacity. And Jesus makes it very clear that that's actually the opposite. That's not true. And even if there are some qualities that overlap and some qualities that work well, the qualities that are needed to lead within God's kingdom begin in a place of service, not in a place of authority. And if authority is given and they do emerge as a leader, they're a servant leader and not a manager. Not a manager of the church or a manager of God's people or a manager of anybody's spiritual lives, but they're a servant. Because that's where it all begins. So I think that's maybe an area that we could do a little bit better at, is identifying that what the world calls a good leader and what Jesus calls a good leader are not always the same thing. And actually 99 times out of 100 are not the same thing. In order to lead in God's kingdom, in order for us, which, to be fair, I don't know, this is something that me and Matt have talked about before. I'm going to be really hard-pressed to ever find the passage where God calls us to be leaders. But instead, we're called to be servants. Obviously, the church needs leaders. Leaders are going to emerge out of the servants. But if the servant's heart is where we begin, then only good can come from there. There's got to be a distinct difference, I believe, between kingdom leaders and between worldly leaders, because otherwise, what makes us all that different from the world? But anyway, I loved that thought and that idea of authority versus service and Jesus' approach to it, and maybe the way that we could do a better job of approaching it. seeking to be led by servants to make us better servants. And sometimes the world might look on the outside in and say, they're not strong enough, or they're not demanding enough, or they're pushover, or they're not a good enough manager, or this or that or the other. But I think if they have the heart of a servant, and they can lead God's people to also have hearts of a servant, and they meet the qualifications within the book, and that's exactly who Jesus wants it to be. He doesn't want it to be the person that has a padded resume. He actually stops the people that are trying to pad their resume, which is perfectly fine if somebody has both. But nevertheless, any comments or thoughts or questions when it comes to all that?
I believe when they started out, they followed him around for 3 years. He raised the dead, all the evil spirits got rid of it, and they were sort of blindsided by all the good things that he had done. And I believe they thought that he could be a heavenly kingdom and have a heavenly kingdom here on earth too. They thought he was going to be king here in Judah, Jerusalem.
Right.
They thought he was going to be the king there. They was going to be serving under him there.
Mm-hmm.
But they had missed it completely.
Yes, sir. They did. And that seems to be what brought on a lot of this conversation. So, yeah. And so,
It's hard to follow somebody around for 3 years, see them do all that, and not believe that they would, if they could raise the dead, they could save themselves,
for sure, I know that.
It'd be hard not to believe it, wouldn't it?
It would. And so as we see kind of a lot of those things that David was talking about brought on this conversation, I forgot to tell you, this kind of is a little bit late, but the title of what we're talking about tonight is Things to Remember When I Disappoint Jesus. And the first one that we saw is right here with who is the greatest, and them arguing about that right after he instituted the Lord's Supper. And the second one comes in what we read after it, as Jesus foretells Peter's denial. This is which we won't dive into this because we're trying to get the big picture and not the small picture. But it's really interesting in verse 31 where he's speaking directly to Simon, but he's speaking directly to Simon about the 12. But then he goes back to speaking directly to Simon again. So, for example, he says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded that you, and that you is plural, humos in Greek is the word for y'all. And so Satan has demanded that y'all, to have y'all, that he might sift you like wheat. But here's where it switches. Then it gets back to verse 32, and he gets into from humos to su, which would be you, directed at Peter. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. And Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you even know me. And so as Jesus is speaking with Peter, he is talking about, which this is the rabbit hole we're going to avoid of the exact meaning of Satan wants you or desires you or wants to take y'all in and sift you like wheat. Just know that around the time of what's about to happen, around the time of the crucifixion and the burial and even some of the persecution, maybe even some of the persecution of the church to come after, that there is going to be a big shift in the way that Jesus' followers, not just in the way that they're treated, but also they're going to have to wrestle with some things internally. Just like what David said. They've watched him raise the dead and they've watched him heal all these people. They've watched him perform all these miracles, and they're about to watch him hang on the cross and die and not save himself, even though people are calling for him to, and then be buried and lay there for 3 days. That had to be a pretty long 3 days. And so there's a process in all of this where I can't imagine all of the ways that Satan is going to work on these 12 in that small period of time, of questioning everything that they ever knew. Well, maybe those miracles, maybe some of it wasn't as real as it, maybe it was a illusion, or maybe this or that or the other, or maybe, he went off by himself sometimes. Maybe he went to pay somebody to pretend to be dead, or maybe, and all of this starts working, and on top of that, all of the external influences of you're walking down the street, you're one of the 12, and people start whispering, I wonder what he's doing now that his teacher's gone and dead. The Messiah who's going to raise himself, the Messiah who's going to rebuild the temple in 3 days. There's a lot of pressures there that I think Jesus is referring to in talking about Satan's demand and desire to have them and sift them like wheat. But also notice, he doesn't just talk about the 12, he hones in on Peter. And he tells Peter what's about to take place. And Peter does what so many of us do so often, that often leads to us disappointing Jesus, is he makes a promise that he can't keep. He makes the promise of, well, God, if you'll just forgive me for this one time, I'll never do it again. Or, God, if you'll just this or that or the other, I promise I will fill in the blank. Or if he makes a promise that and Jesus knows. He says, Jesus, I don't know what you're talking about. I'll go with you to prison. I'll go with you to death. And he has to look him square in the eyes and say, Peter, you're talking about prison and death. And there's going to come a time not too long from now where you're going to act like you don't even know me. Go to prison with me. Die with me. You're about to not even claim to know me. Disappointment number 2. And as we continue to walk through this passage, this is a little interesting one that we'll speed through pretty quick to get to the last disappointment. But it's a really big one. I hate that we're going to gloss over it. So he says to them, when I sent you out with nothing, did you lack anything? And they said no. So basically, keep in mind, we talked about this in Luke chapter 10, when Jesus sent out the 70 or 72, whichever translation you want to take, it really doesn't matter. And when he sent them out with nothing. And the purpose of him sending them out with nothing was to build their faith. The reason that they followed with him and didn't have anything was the exact same reason that Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years being fed by God. Same process. The 12 followed Jesus from place to place throughout the ministry, solely depending upon him, solely depending on people they converted, solely depending on people that they healed and impacted, solely depending on the ministry itself to be what provided for them. And he said, so remember, we walked through that, right? And what did you lack? They said, well, absolutely nothing. He said, but now, he said, verse 36, but now let me tell you, take your money bag and take your knapsack. More or less, take your preparations with you. Because there's going to come a time, it seems here that there is something special about the atmosphere, the context, the way that people responded to Jesus, which makes complete and total sense. Son of God walking on earth, compared to something's going to shift and something's going to change. And we watch it shift and change all through the book of Acts, where those same kind of people become very hostile to the same message because Jesus is no longer there. And so he tells them, take your own knapsack, take your own preparations. He even tells them to take their own sword. I do find that one pretty interesting because we're going to read here, I guess next week, in verse 51, where Peter lashes out, cuts off somebody's ear, and Jesus stops him and then puts Malchus' ear back on. So he tells them to take up the sword, but at the same time, he prohibits them from using it. And we like to get really mad at Peter and look at Peter always overreacting and jumping to conclusions and cutting off somebody's ear. Well, if we read the book, just a few verses before, Jesus told him to take up a sword. He thought he was doing right. Luckily, Jesus was able to correct that. I believe that maybe it has to do with self-defense and an understanding of the attacks that are going to be taken, but also keep in mind that if it was fully self-defense, he'd have told him to take up a shield, go buy a shield. But instead he uses a sword. Maybe there's some Hebrews 4 imagery in there of the Word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword. But there's a lot more to discuss there that we won't have time to. More or less what I want us to get to with this point is Jesus is telling them, make preparations because your ministry is about to change. This is the most disappointing thing ever because their classes are starting to send them back over. And I only got through 1 page of 2 pages, so I'm really not sure what we're going to do next. Okay, we're going to cover, without reading, 39 through 46. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do a part 2 of this because it's that important. So notice we always focus in verses 39 through 46 as Jesus goes and prays on Mount Olive. When he goes and he does that, he has that famous phrase, what is it? Lord, let this cup pass from me. And there is this beautiful chapter in the Cost of Discipleship called the Suffering of Discipleship, where Bonhoeffer lays out that the cup will pass. Jesus just has to drink it. And that's one of those moving things outside of Scripture I've ever read. But anyway, I want us to not focus so much on the Jesus part, but focus on what are the disciples doing? Sleeping. After he told them very specifically to pray that you don't fall into temptation. And that is where we wrap up this first half in seeing disappointment number 3. Jesus is over here sweating blood, hematidrosis, and his disciples can't even bother to stay awake just to pray. Boy, you want to talk about how hard it was to go to the cross just because you don't want to die that way? Talk about how hard it is going to the cross when these are the last 3 things that happen before you're about to be betrayed and turned over, and it's by your closest 12. There's some really big things that we just can't gloss over and we just can't miss. So I guess it'll be next Wednesday night. We're going to come back and we're going to finish up what I can take with me and 3 things to remember when I disappoint Jesus. Because I believe that we all do sometimes, and we need to work through all these. So hope you can be back for part 2 next week. Thank you for all your comments and questions and concerns. And I'll let all the people on the foyer, you may come in now. 578. I think it's on. Now I'm on. 578. If you want to mark that in your songbooks, that'll be the invitation. And before I turn it over to Philip, just a few quick prayer list additions that we wanted to make. I know that Shirley Sewell has been having some head pains, head troubles, headaches, migraines, and things, and so she has an appointment for that on the 28th. Hopefully that'll give some clarity of what's going on and what the plan is. Let's also be praying for Tammy Wisdom, as she is home tonight with a little bit of a stomach bug, not feeling well. We have Andrew Frazier, who as many of us have met the Frasers who've moved here from Wisconsin. This is their son. They left Sunday morning after worship service to go to North Carolina to be with him. He's still in the hospital and still recovering. They're praying for a speedy recovery after his procedure, and hopefully he can get back to his much wanted health. Then Judy Jenkins, let's keep her in our prayers, as her surgery is going to be tomorrow, and that has been very long awaited. Also, Donnie Coulter has some health issues and would appreciate our prayers, as well as David Young, who is a minister in the Murfreesboro area. He has some malignancy and a major surgery that is coming up, but to what extent things are, we don't exactly know. But let's keep him in our prayers as well. Bruce Thomas is home and doing good. That's great to hear. We want to continue to pray for Betty Brown, as well as Misty Bellamy and Jackie Halliburton and a few others. We have a thank you letter from Tony Gregory, aka Cheesy, for all of the Get Well cards that have been sent from our congregation. He really appreciated that. And then we want to extend sympathy to the family of Miss Martha Tucker at the passing of her brother Jimmy Knight. So let's keep them in our thoughts and prayers as well. As far as upcoming events go, Ladies' Day will be March 26th. They need help moving tables after services tonight, so I hope that some of you can please go ahead and plan. We'll go over there and we'll get some tables set up for that. And then prep work will be done Friday at 5 p.m. Friday at 5 p.m. for any ladies that want to be a part of that over here in the fellowship hall. There will also be a memorial service for Morgan Medlin March 26th. That'll be at the Willow Avenue Church of Christ at 11 a.m. Then we have the sign-up list to help with the yard sale that is coming up. Please sign up for that. And if you can help in any way, whether it be beforehand, helping get stuff all together, or be the day of, please see Kelly Smith. Then church T-shirts will be $10 each. Sign up on Realm and on our website, or if you want to, please see Paul, and he can get you signed up really quick. The deadline for those is April 3rd. There will be a men's prayer breakfast April 9th at 8 a.m. And then also in the beginning of April, the Willette Church of Christ will have a gospel meeting with Brother Hickson from Mississippi, I believe. Check the bulletin for this Sunday for more details on that. Youth news, there will be a brown bag hangout this Friday evening. There will be Hope Group March 26th from 2 to 3 p.m. And then youth retreat sign-ups the deadline is Sunday, March 20th. So I guess if you're not signed up, that means you're not going, because I'm pretty sure it's past the 20th. So you missed your chance. Sorry about it, young people. Maybe better luck next year. But anyway, I think that is everything that I had, unless I missed something or somebody. All right, then the song of invitation is number 578, and I'll turn it over to Philip.
Good evening. In 1725, John Newton was born in London. He was raised by his father that was worked for the English Navy as a shipping merchant. His stepmother helped raise him as well. His stepmother had some issues, to say the least. She had some mental issues and things like that. At a young age of about 7, he was sent to a boarding school. The boarding school was known to mistreat young men. After he left boarding school, or he ran away from boarding school, at the age of 11, he joined the English Navy to be with his father. Now, I guess the English Navy, the best way to, at this age was, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the Pirates of the Caribbean, but the English Navy was a step up from pirates. What he did on these boats were manual labor, intensive stuff. He worked for the English Navy for several years, grew up on a boat, with a bunch of sailors. And I guess you can picture a young man of 11 growing up around a bunch of sailors. He learned profanity. He learned a lot of bad stuff. He also denounced God through this whole time. He was on the ship for several years. He later left the English Navy to become a captain of a slave ship. Now, it is what it sounds like. He would gather up slaves in Africa. He would ship them across to the U.S., United States, drop them off, turn around, go back, pick up more, bring them back to the United States. There was several years later, after doing this, there was a storm. This was probably the worst storm he'd ever seen in his life. He was at the wheel. He was the captain. A crew member was swept overboard that was in the exact spot he had been about a few minutes before. This was John Newton's, I guess you would call it, aha moment. He found God. He understood that God was here, God was there. He later began to study the Word, study about Jesus, study about God, and about 5 years later, he penned one of the most famous songs ever to be penned. It goes a little something like this. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. Yes, when the flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess within the veil a life and joy and peace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine. Matthew 8, verses 23 through 27. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came upon the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, Ye of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. We all have storms. Some of us are going through storms right now. Some of us are baptized believers. We know that God will be here for us. We know to ask God for forgiveness. Some of us have yet to take on God in baptism. God will ease your storm. He will calm the waves, calm the waters. And all he asks is for you to confess, be baptized. If anyone would like to come forward tonight, confess your sins, be baptized, or you're going through a storm that you just need help, you just need prayers to get through, come forward now as we stand and sing.
When we walk with Mike back up in case for the online people. Again, want to thank you for being here. Be back with us again Sunday. You will be in good hands. I'll be guest speaking at the sister congregation over in Red Bullen. Matt will have the Bible class, and then the young men will be leading in worship service. Y'all ready? 2.5 nods. They're ready. That's what I like to hear. So I really look forward to us being led by them in that. And if there isn't anything else, Matt Barlow, would you mind closing us out in prayer?
Lord, we're so thankful for another day that you bless us with the opportunity to come together to study your lesson from your divine word. We're so thankful for Brother Cameron and Philip who brought us the messages of the hour. Please help us each to have heard them, put them into our everyday lives, and help us each to be better Christians. Lord, we know that our sick list is growing every day and that it continues to grow throughout the world. We ask that you be with all the ones that are sick. Please help them in any ways that they need. Lay your healing hands on their bodies. Most of all, Lord, we're so thankful for your Son, Jesus, who truly gave it all for us. All these things we ask in his name.